All right, so are you ready to take a deep dive into Flowers for Algernon?
Absolutely. I'm excited to talk about this one. It's a real classic.
Yeah, it's been on my list forever, and I think a lot of our listeners are probably in the same boat. They've heard of it, but maybe not sure if it's for them.
Yeah, I get that. It's one of those books that kind of has a reputation.
So maybe we can start with the big question: should people actually read Flowers for Algernon?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd give it a solid 9 out of 10. But, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea.
Okay, fair enough. So before we get into all that, I think we should probably give folks a quick rundown of what the book's actually about.
Right. So basically it's about this guy, Charlie. He's got an IQ of 68. And he gets picked for this experimental surgery that's supposed to make him a genius.
Okay, so right off the bat, we're dealing with some pretty big sci-fi concepts.
Yeah.
But I know some people might be thinking, sci-fi, isn't that all like spaceships and aliens?
Yeah, some people hear sci-fi and they tune out. But trust me, this is different. It's not about the technology so much as it's about what happens to Charlie. You see how this change impacts his relationships, his view of the world, everything.
And how do we see all that? Is it like from a bunch of different perspectives?
Nope. That's what's so cool about this book. The whole thing is told through Charlie's journal entries. So you're right there in his head experiencing everything as it happened.
Oh, wow. So we're seeing the world through his eyes as he gets smarter.
Exactly. And the way Keyes does it with the writing style, it's just brilliant. Like early on, when Charlie's still got a low IQ, his writing is really simple. Lots of misspellings, bad grammar. But as he gets smarter, the writing gets more complex, more sophisticated. It's like you're watching his mind evolve right on the page.
That is so cool. I've got to say, I'm already intrigued. But, I've seen a lot of reviews online that mention how emotionally heavy this book is. Some people even say they cried while reading it. Are we talking like full-on depressing here?
It's definitely not a light and fluffy read. It does deal with some tough stuff. I mean, you're watching this guy grapple with some really big questions about intelligence and identity and how society treats people who are different. And yeah, there are some parts that are really heartbreaking, but honestly, I wouldn't say it's depressing overall.
Okay, good. Because no one wants to be bummed out for like a whole week after finishing a book.
Right. And there are moments of humor in there too, especially early on when Charlie's still kind of naive and figuring things out. Plus, there's this underlying sense of hope that runs through the whole story.
That makes sense. But as a reader, I'm always a bit wary of books that deal with disabilities,
Mm.
especially intellectual disabilities.
Hmm.
I feel like sometimes they can fall into these stereotypes or they get overly sentimental.
Yeah.
Does Flowers for Algernon avoid that trap?
Oh, totally. Keyes does an amazing job of creating a really complex and believable character in Charlie. He's not just some symbol or a stereotype. He's a fully fleshed out person with his own desires and fears and motivations. And you really feel for him, especially as he starts to understand the way people have treated him in the past.
Yeah, that's got to be tough. Like realizing that people haven't always been kind to you.
Exactly. And there's this one scene where Charlie confronts his coworkers at the bakery. He finally realizes that they've been making fun of him all along. And, and it's heartbreaking. But it's also really powerful because it shows how Charlie's growing intelligence is opening his eyes to the world in a whole new way. He's seeing things he never noticed before.
Makes you think about all those little moments of prejudice and casual cruelty that happen every day.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that makes this book so relevant, even though it was written decades ago. It forces us to look at our own biases and assumptions about people who are different.
It's like a mirror held up to society in a way.
Exactly. It's asking us to do better, to be more understanding and compassionate.
Where you've definitely got me thinking. And honestly, I'm even more curious about this book now.
I think you'll really enjoy it.
So we've talked about the heavy stuff, but a lot of sci-fi fans love a good mind-bending concept.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And this book's got a pretty wild one at its core. But, sometimes those high concept stories can feel a bit emotionally detached. Like
Right.
you're just following the ideas, not really connecting with the
I
characters.
know what you mean.
Does Flowers for Algernon avoid that trap?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, the premise is definitely sci-fi, but this book is so much more than that. It's really about the human experience. What does it mean to be intelligent? What are the things that truly matter in life?
Hmm. Some deep questions there.
Yeah, Keyes doesn't shy away from the tough stuff. And the way he explores those questions through Charlie's journey is just so powerful and moving.
Speaking of journeys,
Yeah.
a lot of reviews online mention the ending of this book,
Oh, yeah.
and they say it's pretty rough. Without giving anything away, can you talk about that a bit?
It's definitely not your typical Hollywood ending. Let's just say that Charlie's journey takes some unexpected turns, and he ends up facing some really difficult
This
challenges.
is not a feel-good story.
It's not necessarily a feel-good story, but it's definitely a feel-something story.
Okay, I like that. A feel-something story. But, sometimes when a book is that emotionally intense, it can be hard to come away from it feeling, like, hopeful.
I get that. But I wouldn't say this book is devoid of hope. I think it's more about finding hope in unexpected places, even in the midst of difficult circumstances.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Mm.
So we've talked a lot about what makes Flowers for Algernon so unique.
Hmm.
But are there any other books out there that kind of scratch a similar itch? Like, for listeners who finish this one and they're hungry for more?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, there are definitely other books that explore similar themes. If you're fascinated by the idea of rapidly acquired intelligence, you might check out Understanding by Ted Chiang. It's a short story, but it's so well written, and it really delves into the psychological and philosophical implications of superintelligence.
Ooh, that sounds right up my alley.
Yeah, and if you're looking for something that explores the challenges of living with a disability, I'd highly recommend The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. It's told from the perspective of a teenage boy with autism, and it's just so beautifully written and insightful.
I actually read that one a while back. It's amazing.
Isn't it? It really makes you see the world in a whole new way. And that's kind of what Flowers for Algernon does, too. It challenges your assumptions and makes you think about things from a different perspective.
I love books that can do that.
Yeah.
So I've got to ask, after spending so much time with Flowers for Algernon, what would you say is the biggest takeaway, like the one thing you really hope readers will come away with?
I think the most important message is the importance of empathy, really trying to understand and connect with people who are different from us, whether it's because of their intelligence or their background or anything else. Charlie's story reminds us that everyone deserves kindness and compassion.
Yeah, that's a powerful message for sure. So, final verdict time. Should Flowers for Algernon go on my to-read list?
Absolutely. It's one of those books that everyone should read at least once. It's a challenging read at times, but it's so worth it.
Okay, you've convinced me. I'm adding it to my list right now.
Hmm.
And for our listeners, if you're looking for a book that will stay with you long after you finish it, Flowers for Algernon is definitely worth checking out. It's wild to think about how this book actually makes you feel smarter as you're reading it.
Right, like you're going through that transformation alongside Charlie.
Exactly. And it all comes down to Key's writing style.
Oh, yeah, he was a master of his craft.
Can you talk a bit more about what makes the writing so special?
Well, for one thing, he uses this technique called stream of consciousness.
Okay, I've heard of that, but I'm not totally sure what it means.
So basically, it's like you're getting a direct feed of Charlie's thoughts and feelings, no filter. It's almost like you're inside his head.
Ooh, that sounds intense.
It is. And as his intelligence changes, so does the writing. Like in the beginning, his journal entries are full of these misspellings and grammatical errors.
Yeah.
It reflects his limited cognitive abilities at that point.
Right.
But as he gets smarter, the writing becomes more complex, more sophisticated, even poetic at times. It's really incredible how Keyes pulls it off.
So the writing itself is almost like a character in the story.
Exactly. And then when Charlie starts to regress, the writing style regresses too. It adds this whole other layer of tragedy to the story.
Wow, I'm getting chills just thinking about it. It's amazing how much thought Keyes put into every detail.
Right. It's what makes Flowers for Algernon such a masterpiece. It's a story that works on so many levels: intellectual, emotional, stylistic.
It's funny. We started this deep dive by asking whether people should read Flowers for Algernon. And I feel like at this point, it's pretty obvious what our answer is.
Oh, yeah. This is a must-read for sure. If you haven't experienced this book yet, you're missing out.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up our deep dive into Flowers for Algernon. Hopefully this has given you a good sense of why this book is considered such a classic. It's a powerful story that will stay with you long after you finish it.
Absolutely. And it's a book that everyone should experience at least once.
So if you're looking for a thought-provoking read that explores the depths of the human experience, Flowers for Algernon is definitely worth your time.
Until next time, happy reading.